ladies and gentlemen, to Carmine's Arena, a cultural gourmet of information, if you will, a feast for your mind and soul. And now, without further delay, the man, the myth, the maestro, Carmine Arena.
Hello and welcome again to Carmine's Arena, site of contest and conflict, venue for and of resolution. Resolution in terms of focus, remedy, and commitment, both yours and mine, to the preservation, the propagation, and indeed the celebration of Western civilization. Now, the last time we spoke about reason and how overvalued much of it is, that we should question our intellection. Yes, indeed, especially those who think they have access to it via academia. You see, sometimes you can overthink a wrinkle, and what happens is that the wrinkle holds fast, and, well, much like that millipede, you know, the insect with 1,000 legs, it is said, was asked, how do you move all of them at the same time? The moment it had to think about it, it froze in place. And this tells us a good deal about what intellection can do and why a certain degree of irrationality, yes indeed, and a minimum of common sense can very often lead to rather cheerful conclusions. Irrationality, as I praised it, was not praise of insanity. By irrationality, I certainly don't mean derangement. I mean rearrangement of perspective. And perspective is the theme of this episode. We pointed out the last time that goodness and love are irrationally concrete. One can make reasonable arguments against both. The arguments would be specious, false, but they would be resoundingly logical. On the other hand, with a little irrationality, a little balance, a little variation, we can tweak reason, modify it, and therefore improve it. With reason, my friends, and as an artist, I know this to be a fact, reason never reaches what is magisterial, what is miraculous, what is mysterious, and what is magical, as we spin on our own axis and then again spin about the sun. As I speak to you, it is happening at this moment. We are unaware of it, and even now that we are aware of it, it hasn't affected it one iota. This is one of the great reasons why civilization, of which I'm enamored, civilization, my dear friends, hear me, is woman. Yes, indeed. The moment women cease to be women, civilization is in decline and is suffering from decadence. Why do I say this? Women are naturally intuitive, and their intuition reigns supreme over instinct, whereas we males, we pathetic creatures, are all instinct and care very little about intuition. Women, on the other hand, sensing one day that they will be mothers or are mothers, must be visionary and must think of posterity for the sake of their children. This immediately prompts intuition and stays instinct. So that self-gratification and instant gratification are not a womanly aim. A woman has the prerogative, it is said, to change her mind. That is again one of the magisterial reasons why civilization is woman. She has the ability to see a number of perspectives, whereas we poor guys, we get one opinion, we hang on to several little pieces of a habit, and there it is. We don't want to be budged. And we can use reasonable explanations to account for it. You know, Plato, good old Plato, by way of Socrates, who wrote that wonderful Republic, that classic. After Plato, there have been many philosophers, very great minds, philosophy, the love of knowledge. And yet, all of those philosophies end up being footnotes to Plato. But each of them is a different perspective. Even when they deny Plato, they got to deny Plato. It's a different perspective. And this is one of the reasons why one of my favorite philosophers, and a truly great one, not only a philosopher, a philologist, a professor of philology, and a one-time composer, yes, he was a musician, was none other than the great Friedrich Nietzsche. Now, Nietzsche had many he admired. Hegel was one, a philosopher whom he thought was, he was a genius. However, he turned from him because, in the end, Hegel was too systemic. In other words, he followed a system. And Nietzsche, God love him, he suspected systems all of his life. Yes. In fact, he would have two lists. On one list, he had the people he favored. On the other list, he had the people he disfavored. Very often, the same name is on both lists. You see, he often said it's all in perspective. Learn to take yours with a certain degree of grace and levity. Would that all those talking heads on television would hear him. Because I'm reminded, Fred Allen said, the sincerest form of imitation is television. Well, to get back, Nietzsche understood that consistency was the hobgoblin of the narrow mind, along with Ralph Waldo Emerson, who understood that to be consistent leaves great minds with absolutely nothing to do. And so, we have reason that could give us specious, bogus, fraudulent arguments as based on facts which are sometimes the most fraudulent of all characters, falling under the heading of lies, damn lies, and statistics. Now, Dali, Salvatore Dali, the artist, who was an ocean of megalomania and ego, was asked, "Are you a genius, sir?" He says, "Of course I'm genio." And then bobbed to the surface of that ocean of egotism to admit, but not of the rank of Raphael. And the interviewer was startled at this admission, couldn't understand that. He said, "Let me explain," Dali said. "I can never become a great artist like Raphael and many of the others. because I am too much the intellectual. He said there a mouthful. He understood at that moment and wanted to make it clear that he suffered from intellectual and over-intellectualizing all of his life, intellection and over-intellectualizing all of his life, and that as a result, he blunted the edges of intuition, of imagination, and inspiration, whereas those other artists did not. You see, reason adds to the din that is so much a part of our life, and that is so much a part of television, and so much a part of traffic, etc., ad infinitum, ad nauseum. Mark Rothko put it beautifully, the great artist, when he said, silence is so accurate. He knew that in great music, for example, if you counted all the notes that were meant to be sounded, and you counted all the rests where there was no sound at all, you'd be startled at how in love music is with silence itself. Now, how unreasonable a statement that is, how beautifully irrational, and yet it's the case. Now, there are women today, unfortunately, who cannot change their minds. These women, for the most part, I hate to say this, I'm going to be accused of being sexist, have lost their femininity, and they've become feminist. Now, this is not to say there aren't feminists who have retained their femininity. I can think of two right offhand, Tammy Bruce and Camille Paglia. They know how to question the errors of feminism. They are not locked into a rhetoric, a cloning of thought. They appreciate the diversity of opinion. They appreciate perspective, others and their own. But when they come against a wall, they know how to put graffiti all over it and laugh. You see, if you study feminist studies in universities and in colleges, gender study programs, you find that they sacrifice a very major area of female knowledge, and that is biology. They want nothing to do with it. They suspect that it's going to weaken their opinion. They know, though they'll never admit it, that biology, after all, is destiny. They don't want a female's destiny. They want a feminist destiny, which is a false construct and so excessively filled with reason that it ultimately is madness. You remember, or you might remember, or not, that I gave an example by way of G.K. Chesterton, saying, today I'm Carmine Arena. Suppose I wake up tomorrow morning and I decide that I'm Jesus Christ, that I have revealed myself to myself, or it's been revealed to me who exactly I am, okay? I always said I was a work in progress. Now I've become Jesus Christ. Well, there'd be people coming out of the woodwork to disprove in many, many ways why I am not Jesus Christ. And I would listen to them with absolute serenity. And when they were finished with all of their remarks and observations, I merely look at them and state the following. I have been denied before, and I expect to be denied many, many times again. Now, there's nothing irrational in that statement, is there? And yet it is utterly mad. That's what you hear all around you, and you say, oh yeah, but you start thinking about it a bit, and you realize you have been in the presence of an excess of reason. Madness is not the excess of reason. Is not the absence of reason, but you guessed it, the excess of reason. Now, feminists fault us for being sexist, even some females. But they offer us nothing but sexism right back at our face. Between the feminine and the feminist, there lies an abyss. The feminine have looked into that abyss and have recoiled from it, seeing that the abyss is staring back. The feminist will not look into the abyss. In fact, it denies that one exists. But there is one. It is a pit of their black, dark errors, and filled with the writhing, muffled screams of aborted children. All this for the control they want over their body, the control that went awry when they surrendered it and then decided, oops, I don't want to be pregnant. And they reach for privacy issues. You've lost your privacy the minute you become pregnant, it seems to me. One should be pre-choice rather than pro-choice. But then again, who am I but a mere man? Now, I've asked women, and they support this argument, those who are feminine and not feminist. And I'll go on showing you the differences. Now, recently, I heard an old-time feminist saying, she's helped the movement. Oh, she's exalted. She said this, when I was a girl, I had 3 abortions at a time when abortions were illegal. I could have died, she said. Do you hear that? How utterly self-referential. Not once, not twice, 3 times. Now we have children who are assisted in achieving abortions without the parental consent or knowledge of their parents. We have arrived now at the nanny state. Why not? The family is crippled. Feminists don't mind the muddled family environment. It helps their cause. This nanny state is the last frontier of quitters. Recently, I found an article headed, this is in the New York Times, about Mayor Bloomberg, who spent privately millions and government funds millions. Listen to this heading. Disappointed city will stop paying poor for good behavior. They sent down to Mexico a deputy mayor, Linda Gibbs, I hope I got her name right, to study a welfare program in Mexico City that pays children to go to school and pays them for their good behavior. We took that idiot model and we now have it, or did have it, in New York, but we found that the program didn't work. Indeed, would it? Pay somebody to behave well. Can you imagine how these good intentions have brought us to this state of affairs? Tell me that I'm not to be worried about civilization in decline. This is what one of the officials had to say. It gives children the motivation to want to go to school because they know they're going to get something back. Thank God I went to the New York public school system when it was the foremost system in America and in the world, and served as the ideal. Going to that kind of school back then was what it must be like going to Eton or Harrow today. Those days are gone, my friends. Not is it enough for us to give children breakfast and lunch for nothing, we have to pay them for showing up in the first place. To think what an insult it is that if you're poor, you're going to have bad behavior. I remember Lady Bracknell, Oscar Wilde's wonderful character, who often spoke for him. She said this, really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? You see, there was a time when the poor were considered highly moral and superior in morality to the prosperous. Boy, have we turned that on its head. Indeed. I've known a lot of poor people, and I've known a lot of them who were very, very good and didn't have to be rewarded for being so. Lady Astor, once an American citizen who became a British subject and became the first woman to sit in the House of Parliament, was approached by a bum when her carriage stopped for a moment in the Bowery. He said, "Hey, lady, I ain't eaten in 3 days." She looked at him sadly and said, "My dear, you must force yourself." We must get back to something like that, because it's better to get a hand up, not a hand out. These handouts are asking you to surrender, ever becoming the best version of yourself. Yes, indeed. It all began in a garden, and it ended with the book of Revelations. Proust said, "Happiness is beneficial, but it is grief that develops the power of the mind." There is not a woman in the world the possession of whom is as precious as the truths which she reveals to us by causing us to suffer. You see, women don't cause us to suffer anymore. The most they give us is a momentary frustration because they become so user-friendly. They used to cause us to suffer, and as a result, we became deeper of mind and of purpose and of obligation. Now we float following and running after politicians who are more ostrich than anything else, a flightless bird that keeps batting its wings, running and running again for office, but they never fly, they never soar, and they'll never take us to a higher level. If you liberate yourself from your intuition, you ladies out there, and become purely instinctual, we can kiss civilization goodbye. The human construct is flawed, and it needs perspective. That's why we need you to constantly change your mind and use that prerogative. The wrinkles in life are best pleaded by art. That's why I ask you constantly, imitate art for its precision, its detail, its elegance, and its love of beauty, and its long-lasting qualities. Not today, not this instant. Even art knows how to take the wrinkles and pleat them. It takes perspective, listen to this, and makes a flat surface of a painting look like you could walk into it. That is called perspective. And it's the vanishing point that causes that. Everything has that one vanishing point in the painting and deceives the eye. You can only deceive your way to the truth because the truth will always lie beyond that vanishing point, my dear friends. Absolutes are out of the reach of reason, but not intuition. And the irony is, and females who are feminine know this, men have been liberated by feminism. Sperm banks is what they've been marginalized to, where they could be deadbeat dads with impunity who are paid for their spawn and never have to bother with their children. Single moms are elevated to what? Excuse me. They are a ticking time bomb. They are the perfect example of the triumph of instinct over intuition. It is the yin yang become yin yang yuck. Let me read to you what JFK said at Amherst College about poetry, which has nothing to do with reason. When power leads man towards arrogance, poetry reminds him of its limitation. When power narrows the areas of man's concern, poetry reminds him of the richness and diversity of his existence, and so on. Read that address, and you will learn that women are to be blessed who can change their minds and who don't want equality because they already know they're superior. Why would they want to be equal? They have the superiority of the love of wisdom and the wisdom of love. Lady Astor put it beautifully when she said, "I married beneath myself. Most women do. I hope we can say that again soon. Till next time, keep the faith."
If you have any comments or other remarks, and that I perhaps could even read on some of these broadcasts, please do not hesitate to write to me, Carmine Arena, P.O. Box 1029, Larchmont, New York 10538.